this hour.
Wow, it's huge.
Yeah, it's gigantic.
Every
terms of service and know what they do with that information?
I didn't. I have no idea.
Every move we make.
You have information on 250 million people.
Sure.
Big data is watching us.
They'll dive right into whatever it is and figure out the ramifications of it later.
Does the government know too much?
Whoa, we never could have gotten away with even half of what apparently the Obama administration is now doing.
Can it be controlled?
We balance life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness all the time.
Did
drug trials where the voters are the guinea pigs
help him hit the mother load?
The Democrats took it to the next level.
Fox News reporter, your secret's out. From Washington, D.C., here's John Roberts.
It was in the U.S. Capitol behind me that the age of instantaneous electronic communication arguably began. Samuel Morse officially opened his first telegraph line between here and Baltimore in 1844. The first message he transmitted, Testament. What hath God wrought? Today we might wonder, what hath Samuel Morse wrought? Practically all of us generate, with our computers, phones, and other devices, an almost continuous trail of electronic data. That information can be stored who knows where, analyzed by who knows whom, for who knows what purpose. What does it all mean for the rest of us? Our investigation unfolds as a series of stories that would have seemed unconnected a few years ago. A mysterious new spy center rising in the Utah desert. An unusual sixth grade class in Massachusetts. An unprecedented get out the vote effort here in Washington. In today's world, they all tie together. We begin with a visitor to my home in Atlanta. Hey, Frank, John.
Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you, too. Come on in. In a prior life, Frank Ahern of New York City made a living as a skip tracer, a sort of private investigator who tracks down people who have skipped town and don't want to be found. He'd use the proverbial paper trail, which back in the day was literally made of paper. Phone bills, credit cards, receipts, and so on. He agreed to come to my home outside Atlanta to follow me around, to show how today's paperless paper trail makes it almost impossible to hide. So Frank, just woke up, had a cup of coffee, pull out the laptop, the data gathering. Where does that begin?
The minute you turn it on, because you're letting your IP company know that you're there and you're ready to rock. The IP knows about us, Google knows about us, Yahoo knows about us, the email company knows about us.
I'm going to send an email here to the lawn service company. Ahern says he never had this kind of detailed information back in his skip tracing days.
You used to get phone records that would say, Frank called, Ted at whatever hour. With emails, it said Frank emailed Ted, and this is what he wrote.
And according to the chipmaker Intel, we send more than 204 million emails every minute, each one generating raw information about ourselves that is, Ahern says, indelible. If we delete things from our account, are they actually deleted?
The only delete button you have is on your laptop. There's no delete button on the internet.
The internet is forever.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, it's not just emails that can last forever. On average, every minute, at least 6 million Facebook pages and 1.3 million YouTube videos are viewed. I've just turned on my television set, Frank. What have I done by doing that?
Well, you let the cable TV company know that, one, you're home, and two, you're changing the channel, plus they know what you're watching.
Let's pause here for a second. You probably figured the cable company knew that. But later on, we're going to tell you how data mining experts working for President Obama's campaign drilled into that information as part of an unprecedented get-out-the-vote effort in 2012. Did your TV remote help re-elect the president? Stay tuned. Netflix analyzes when you pause, rewind, fast forward, or dump out of a show early. In fact, Netflix used this data to help develop its much-talked-about original hit series, House of Cards. Frank Ahern says something similar is happening with my Kindle. I do more and more of my reading on it. Books, and the daily papers, too. From what I understand, Frank, some of these e-readers are reporting back to the company how quickly I'm reading the book, the words I'm highlighting, the sentences or paragraphs that I'm underlining. That's incredible.
This is a prime example of what next. You buy a book online, and then you find out, wow, they've been tracking me.
So I've already left a fairly substantial digital trail so far and barely even left the house. So now we'll go out and run some errands and see what other breadcrumbs we drop. As we hit the road, Ahern points out that my GPS tracks everywhere I go. But that's not all. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration proposed regulations requiring auto manufacturers to include event data recorders, better known as black boxes, in all new cars beginning in September 2014. Some insurance companies already offer lower rates if you install one in your current vehicle. But how much is your privacy worth? You already give up so much unknowingly. First thing I'm going to do is punch in my customer loyalty number here. Take that.
Did you read the terms of service and know what they do with that information?
I didn't. I have no idea.
That's a problem.
Let's pause here again. It turns out many of those terms of service agreements are a way to learn more about you as a consumer.
These are opt-in relationships where you're saying, this is my identity, here's my name, here's my address.
Brian Kennedy is the CEO of Epsilon, a leading data-driven marketing services firm. His company builds profiles on consumers to help businesses market to them more directly. You have information on 250 million people. Area code plus telephone, bank card issue date, education level, income, child date of birth, dwelling type. Would you be comfortable giving up as much information about yourself as you have about a lot of people out there?
Yes, absolutely. No qualms.
No qualms because, Kennedy says, that peek into your private world will make your life as a consumer much more satisfying. Which brings me to my next stop with Frank Ahern, the pharmacy. So, Frank, this is pretty innocuous. It's just pediatric saline nasal mist. But what little piece of information has been added to my digital profile now?
Your credit card company knows you have a child, and the pharmacy as well has a record of you having a child.
If I send an email, if I go get some gas, if I go to the pharmacy and pick something up, what can you learn about a person?
Well, you can learn a lot. I mean, you've been traced and tracked all along. The consolidating of it is the big problem and the scary part.
A quick stop by the ATM, where my picture is taken and my bank records the transaction. And as I take off down the road, any number of traffic cameras record my route. Frank, coming up to the toll booth here. What are we watching for in this case?
The cameras, number one, and taking pictures of your license plate. And if you have the pass, they got a record of where you're going.
And where you came from. I finally arrive at the office. Inside, I can hardly make a move that isn't recorded in some form. Like most big companies, Fox News uses security cameras and warns us that our online activity may be monitored. Other companies are going a lot further in this regard. Sociometric Solutions of Boston makes the Sociometric Badge that senses and records how employees interact with their colleagues. It gauges how much someone talks versus how much they listen. CEO Ben Weber predicts that in 6 months, many companies will be using this as their ID badge.
It tells you, are you moving around? We can even look at posture from that motion sensor by looking at changes in acceleration. So I can tell, are you leaning in during conversation? Are you sort of, leaning away? I mean, that indicates a lot about, again, the interaction. The whole point with this technology is to make, places better places to work, to make people more productive.
Back in my office, I asked Ahern about another device that promises increased productivity, the smartphone.
That's the gold mine of information. I mean, your phone calls, your text, your physical location, the apps you use, the emails. It's near unlimited.
By now, you are surely thinking that all that digital information has made the job of the skip tracer, the tracking and finding of people who would much rather stay lost, a lot easier. And you're dead at the beginning. Back in New York City, Ahern is no longer in that line of business. It turns out big data has opened up a more profitable line of work. He is now helping people disappear.
People who are victims of stalkers, people who are high-end business, want to make sure their homes can't be located and personal things about them family-wise.
But he says he gives his clients that same warning he gives me. Is it really possible to erase your digital footprint?
Absolutely not.
Coming up, data mining for political gold. Is that how President Obama won a second term? There's a line often attributed to Thomas Jefferson. An informed citizenry is the bulwark of democracy. But what happens when politicians know so much more about us than we know about them? My colleague Peter Boyer joins me now from New York. And Peter, welcome to the team.
Thanks, John. You know, the Obama campaign did know a lot about us, and that might have helped him win a second term.
Thank you, America. God bless you. God bless these United States.
I so wish that I had been able to fulfill your hopes to lead the country in a different direction, but the nation chose another leader.
To nearly half of America, election night 2012 came as a shock. With a terrible economy and high unemployment at home, new dangers and uncertainty abroad, President Obama seemed so beatable.
My heart and my whole soul was, we're going to win. I was there.
Yeah, I think we were convinced that we would win. We knew that the energy and passion was with our voters. And we saw polls that showed that I would win among independents in places like Iowa.
But Romney didn't know what Obama knew.
All right, let's see if this works.
Obama's team had used the advantages of incumbency, time and money, to create something new in politics.
They sort of created the perfect political corporation.
Sasha Eisenberg literally wrote the book on this new science of political campaigning that Obama mastered.
To make sure that people know how to vote.
By harnessing your data and running experiments borrowed from behavioral psychology, the Obama campaign made a virtual profile of every single persuadable voter in the country, targeted them with personalized messages, and coaxed them to the polls.
So these are basically like drug trials for politics, pharmaceutical trials, where the voters are the guinea pigs.
This experimental politics was developed in this very plain-looking Washington, D.C. office building that is home to the labor giant, the AFL-CIO. Inside is a secretive entity called the Analyst Institute. What is the Analyst Institute?
The Analyst Institute is a consortium of liberal groups, parties, campaigns, and consultants. It was designed specifically to do science in secret to help Democrats win elections.
Eisenberg likens this enterprise to a political Manhattan Project with the goal of developing political superweapons. It was first seen in a Michigan governor's race 6 years ago. A couple of researchers were testing a concept called identity salience.
They randomly assigned voters to get one of several pre-election get-out-the-vote reminders. And one of them said something like, Dear Peter, here's your history as a voter, and here are your neighbors' vote histories. And then there was a threat.
A threat to tell your neighbors you didn't vote.
And this increased turnout among the people who received it by 20%.
The Obama team recognized that behavioral psychology could help them shape what voters thought and influence how they behaved. A consortium of psychologists helped Obama to define Mitt Romney. Even the conversations that Obama volunteers had with voters were carefully scripted.
The Obama Get Out the Vote scripts had this thing where they'd say, do you plan to vote on Tuesday? What time do you plan to vote? What will you be doing beforehand? Where will you be coming from? We know from experiments that having you make a plan, having you visualize yourself doing this in advance, makes you more likely to actually follow through on it.
The campaign embedded several people from the Analyst Institute into the re-election headquarters in Chicago. So what was the cave?
So the cave is where we put the analysts.
Carol Davidson was Director of Integration and Media Targeting for the Obama campaign.
The hardcore analysts were in that room for multiple reasons. So this was our more top secret work, right? So, you don't want as press coming by to see what was on the screens of everyone. And we actually, during the election, didn't even really want people to know that the group even existed.
The president's tech team worked its algorithms to determine exactly who the persuadable voters were in the battleground states. Carol Davidson figured out how to get the Obama message to those specific voters. She developed something called the Optimizer. It showed her what television shows the persuadables were watching and when. This information was sold by some cable companies.
We were able to get the data from our vendors, ingest data into the system, and then at the same time pair that data to the voter file data.
There's also a lot of people find something sort of creepy about this much data being out there about them and being used in a political campaign.
to me, at the end of the day, you get emails or direct or mail sent to your house all the time that, like, you didn't know the person that sent them to you and they still knew your name. So I could say, hi, Peter, like, this is Barack Obama. That might be jarring, right? And like,
yeah, it would
freak you out. So is it just different, or is it really a concern about invading your life?
Give me an example of a program that I might not have expected to see a political ad on.
We aired stuff on, like, Judge Judy and kind of all over the place.
Did you then have a way of testing whether or not the optimizer was working?
So if you're defining success, like, we won the election, if we define success of, like, how did the optimizer specifically do it, the only thing that I can look at is we got more impressions, we had larger audience, and we paid less for it. And that was because we were willing to buy things in, like, untraditional places.
At one point during the campaign, they were running shows on 60 different cable stations, whereas the Romney campaign was running shows on 15 different cable stations.
Patrick Ruffini is a Republican consultant who has been preaching to his party for years about the political power of data.
Is one side doing better than the other?
I don't think this is a question of being ahead and behind. I think it's a question perhaps of being almost on two different planets.
Well, that's an extreme view, but he's absolutely right.
Karl Rove is a Fox News contributor and former White House chief of staff, who was also close to the Romney campaign.
The Democrats have a big advantage on this. Both sides micro-targeted. The Democrats, however, took it to the next level.
Rove says the difference is Republicans based their analysis on a single snapshot, while Obama's team constantly updated their data.
The brilliance of the Obama campaign was to say we need to dynamically do this so that as events intrude into a campaign, so that we can exploit those openings.
On election night, the Romney camp had no idea what was hitting them. I wondered if that was behind one of the evening's most talked about television moments.
Here we go.
One of the biggest blocks of votes out in the state are the Republican suburbs inside Hamilton County.
Rove was talking to the Romney campaign, and they still believed their man could win.
And they believed it.
And they believed it. And they believed it. And as a matter of fact, at the end of the night, you're absolutely right. Hamilton County, an historically Republican county, gets carried narrowly by Republicans in most elections, went into the Obama column.
Rove insists that Republicans can compete and will even win this new political arms race. That will excite many GOP partisans who just won a victory. But will this new way of politics just give us better manipulators rather than better leaders?
What happened to old-style political gut and political leadership, where you're out there trying to sell an idea to people and convince voters this idea is worth voting for?
Well, you put your finger on a good thing, because if you rely on the data to dictate everything to you, you make no room for leadership. The responsibility of leadership is not simply to follow, but to mold public opinion in the right direction.
As we've just seen, data is power. So how would you feel about a new government data center big enough to collect and store every phone call, email, surveillance video, and internet search from around the world? The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, drafted in 1789, declared, among other things, that a person's papers would not be subject to unreasonable searches. The founders felt strongly that we should be able to keep our letters, our diaries, our writings private. 140 years later, in 1929, Secretary of State Henry L. Stimson echoed that sentiment when he shut down the Cipher Bureau, the agency that decoded foreign communications. Stimson declared, "Gentlemen don't read each other's mail." Much has changed. A new electronic age of emails, tweets, and blogs, and a new political age posing threats we can't ignore. Pearl Harbor taught America what it didn't know could hurt it very much. There was a need to be up on enemy intelligence.
This form of treachery shall never again endanger us.
After World War II came the Cold War and the threat of global communism. It sparked a fierce debate at the highest levels regarding citizens' rights versus national security. And out of that debate ultimately came the National Security Agency, or NSA. In the 1950s, the Spy Center was so secretive, the joke was the initials stood for No Such Agency.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
After Watergate, however, people wanted to know what the spy agencies were really up to. In 1975, General Lou Allen became the first director of the NSA to testify publicly before Congress. The agency, once so secretive, was exposed. The public learned that the NSA, headquartered at Fort Meade, Maryland, was eavesdropping on messages sent into and out of the country. In response, in 1978, the federal government passed FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which required the NSA to get warrants from special FISA courts before it could perform certain surveillance within the United States. The NSA adapted and moved on. With the fall of the Soviet Union, its mission seemed less urgent to many, and the NSA lagged behind in the latest technology. As General Michael Hayden, the NSA director who took charge in 1999, put it, in an age of telecommunications breakthroughs, the NSA was becoming deaf. But 9/11 delivered a shock that was loud enough for everyone to hear. The NSA got a bigger budget and a new mission: stop the next attack. Which leads us to a massive data center being built by the NSA in the Utah desert. Its capacity to collect and analyze data so enormous, it has even former NSA staffers worried.
It's really a turnkey situation where it can be turned quickly and become a totalitarian state pretty quickly.
How comfortable are you with the government being able to know so much? That's next. Even electrons take up space, though not much. I just bought this memory card, $59, 64 gigabytes. This can hold almost 30,000 copies of this book, War and Peace. Staggering. But what's even more staggering is an NSA data center, 5 times the size of the Capitol behind me, essentially filled with memory cards and computer chips. You may not know about it, but as Catherine Herridge reports, it may soon know about you.
Bluffdale, Utah, 25 miles due south of Salt Lake City, and just west of the middle of nowhere, a massive construction project is nearing completion. The heavily secured site belongs to the National Security Agency.
People call it the Spy Center.
The Spy Center. That's what Jasmine Widmer and Amy Carrillo, who work at the local sandwich shop, told me last summer.
Do you know what they're going to do there?
Collect data.
As good a guess as any for the gargantuan facility the NSA has named the Utah Data Center.
A lot of rumors fly around, oh, it's monitoring or, but no one knows.
We were approached a couple of years ago about possibly bringing water.
Mark Reed is Bluffdale's city manager. He was asked to figure out how to supply the center with its extraordinary water requirements.
We build a large pump station, and then we build a 3 million gallon tank to store the water.
A 3 million gallon water tank just to run the air conditioning to cool the computers. The NSA will neither confirm nor deny the specifics, but some estimate the facility will be capable of storing 5 zettabytes of data. To give you an idea of how much data is in a zettabyte, think of it this way. One iPhone 5 has 16 gigabytes of storage. 1 terabyte would be about 62 iPhones. Stacked, that would be 19 inches high. 1 petabyte would be more than 62,000 iPhones, which would reach higher than the Empire State Building. An exabyte would be more than 62 million iPhones, reaching higher than the International Space Station. And just 1 zettabyte would be more than 62 billion iPhones. Stacked, they would reach past the moon. If it really has 5 zettabytes, the data center could in theory store every email, cell phone call, Google search, and surveillance camera video in America for a very long time.
What are they going to do at the data center?
I don't know. It's classified.
Gary Herbert is Utah's Republican governor.
But you've seen the reports, emails, phone records, banking records, all of that.
I've been on a tour. I've seen the facilities. They've given me kind of a general overview of what they're going to be doing. But the specifics and the details of it, you need to get from them.
But all the NSA would tell us is that the Utah Data Center is a facility for the intelligence community that will have a major focus on cybersecurity. We weren't given access, but we could see it from the sky.
I want you to look real close because right now we're 500 feet over the Utah
out of security clearance.
We can actually see the cranes right now after 12 o'clock.
Wow. From the sky, it's huge.
Yeah, it's gigantic.
Raises the most serious questions about the vast amount of data that could be kept in one place from many, many different sources.
Tom Drake was a senior official at the NSA from August 2001 to 2008 before he resigned for reasons we'll tell you about in a second.
Where does this data come from? Are we talking about email traffic? Are we talking about Facebook postings? Are we talking about telephone calls, travel itineraries?
I don't know precisely. NSA is not saying. Informed speculation suggests just about any of that and perhaps even more.
Drake says Americans should be concerned about letting the government go too far in the name of security.
The only way you can have perfect security is have a perfect surveillance state. That's George Orwell. That's 1984. That's what that would look like.
And Drake is not alone in feeling that way.
Whatever you did electronically, they could capture.
Bill Binney worked at the NSA for nearly 4 decades, starting as a data analyst in the days before desktop computers. After 9/11, the NSA began a warrantless surveillance program approved by President Bush.
That started with the telecoms providing billing data, records of people in the United States, calling people in the United States. My estimate was that they were collecting on the order of 3 billion a day.
3 billion phone records.
3 billion, yeah. That's just internal to this country.
In simple terms, NSA was spying on Americans inside this country.
That's correct.
Binney thought it was wrong and quit in protest. Someone leaked the story of the NSA surveillance program to the New York Times, which exposed it in 2005. In 2007, the NSA officially discontinued that program. The same year, suspecting he was a source for the New York Times leaks, the FBI home.
My son answered the door, and they pushed him back with a gunpoint. And then they came upstairs, and I was in the shower, and one guy came in and pointed the gun at my head and said, "Come on out."
An FBI agent points a gun at your head,
Yep.
and you're naked in the shower.
I had a towel.
Oh, okay, well, good thing.
Binney denies being a leaker and ultimately was not charged with any crimes, but a fellow whistleblower was. Remember Tom Drake? His house was searched too. He was indicted on 5 counts of espionage. The government ultimately dropped those charges in a deal where Drake pleaded guilty to a single misdemeanor of misusing a government computer.
I did have contact with a reporter, but the agreement with the reporter is I would not share anything that was classified in any way, shape, or form.
I continue to believe it was effective, it was lawful, and it was appropriate.
As the director of the NSA from 1999 to 2005, General Michael Hayden was Drake and Binney's boss.
They may have a different, this is America, have a different view. I think it made America safe during a period of great danger.
Hayden says Binney and Drake were simply wrong, uninformed when they said the program was illegal. Apparently Congress, which in 2008 explicitly legalized much of the surveillance going on, and President Obama, who recently reauthorized the law, agree. That makes Drake as worried as ever. He believes President even more aggressively than the man Democrats accused of shredding the Constitution, George W. Bush.
I've had private conversations with people that used to work in the Bush administration, and the reaction is, whoa, we never could have gotten away with even half of what apparently the Obama administration is now doing. If anything, the secrecy regime has been significantly expanded.
Far less transparent than the Bush administration.
Actually, yes.
That's another reason why Binney and Drake have become fierce critics of the massive Utah data center.
The real question is, what is the government going to do with it? Or what could they do with it? And what are the controls? What are the oversight means?
One man we hoped would answer it, the current director of the National Security Agency, General Keith Alexander. When he declined requests to sit down with us for an interview, we stopped by the offices of a Washington think tank, where Alexander was speaking at a cybersecurity event.
Will the Utah Data Center hold the data of American citizens?
No. We don't hold data on U.S. citizens, the people there at NSA. They take protecting your civil liberties and privacy as the most important thing that they do, and securing this nation. And so when people just throw out, oh, they're going to have all this stuff at the Utah Data Center, that's baloney. That's just ludicrous. Now, I'm not going to come out and say, well, here's what we're doing at Utah. That would be ridiculous, too, because it would give our adversaries a tremendous advantage. We're not going to do that.
But Binney says Alexander's protestations miss the point. This is not about the character of his former NSA colleagues. It's about the possibility that the government's stunning new capacity to collect, store, and analyze data will tempt less than noble leaders, if not now, then in the future.
It's really a turnkey situation where it can be turned quickly and become a totalitarian state pretty quickly. The capacity to do that is being set up. If we get the wrong person in office or in the government, they could make that happen quickly.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we balance those three virtues all the time. The question people like me ask the American people is, so how much more do you want me to do?
What can a government computer know, and how can it know it? With the NSA mum, we go to Silicon Valley for answers. And a little later, how many of you have an iPhone or an Android or an iPad or a Galaxy? Put up your hands. Wow. Teaching kids how not to ruin their lives with a smartphone. Ruthless people, risky business, the man who knew too much. These are all videos the recently deceased judge Robert Bork once rented. How do we know? Because when Bork was nominated to the Supreme Court, his rental history was leaked to the press. This privacy violation so outraged people that in 1988, Congress made it a federal crime to disclose someone's video rental records. Now it seems numerous websites don't merely know what you've watched, but what you want to watch next. Most people assume the NSA can know a lot more than that. Can they? Claudia Cowan reports.
Well, when we data mine, we're teaching the computer how to go through large amounts of data and look at large patterns and understand what they mean.
Gary Angel is head of Symphonic, a company he found that makes it, he says, one of the most experienced players in the data mining game.
I'm using a tool here called a listening tool. So this tool collects information on things like Twitter.
A big part of what the folks at Symphonic do is scan the web and analyze data. It's not unlike what the NSA will try to do at the Utah Data Center. Sift through the noise of all the world's electronic communications, isolate the fragments of troubling data, then connect those dots before a threat materializes.
What do you think would surprise people most about data mining? What don't they know?
I think how clumsy it is, how much work goes into getting even the simplest conclusions out of the data. I think there's a sense that computers can do far more than they actually can.
The biggest challenge isn't collecting and storing the information, it's making sense of it all.
I picked a selection of terms that a national security person might be interested in. So things like radioactive, or bridges, or stations, or airports. But here's the tricky part. If we miss stuff, we don't know it. That's really bad.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you turn up lots and lots of things that you say might be threats and none of them are, people lose confidence in the data. They stop looking at it. It's the old crying wolf syndrome, right?
So, according to Angel, even Big Brother faces roadblocks. But if the NSA wants to track you, the Utah Data Center will likely have the ability to do it.
That being said, no human reader going through and looking at your emails. It's impossible. A human is only going to look at the things the computer throws out as interesting or important.
Do you think people have basically accepted that in this post-9/11 age, they're going to trust the government to do what's right with their digital data?
Would any of us go back to a world without the internet? I think not. So the world is probably better, but along with it being better, we've introduced a whole new set of risks.
When we return, growing up at an age where all those stupid things you do can live forever on the internet. 1800s, future Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis worried about a new phenomenon, snapshot photography. If newspapers could snap and print anyone's picture, what would happen to our privacy? Years later on the bench, he wrote that the right free people value most is the right to be left alone. If that's still true, why are so many people putting so much out there online?
What do you think are some of the things you need to think about before you put a photo up online?
Welcome to William E. Norris Elementary School
in Southampton, Massachusetts.
Can't be inappropriate because then you get a reputation for that and it's bad.
Kevin Hodgson is teaching his 6th grade class how not to ruin their lives with their iPhones or whatever gets them online.
And we've been doing it for about 3 years, partly because I was noticing my students talking about their lives on Facebook, and it was clear that they weren't quite sure how to navigate through that.
You should ask yourself, like, do you really need to put this up there?
Do you really need to put this up there? Okay, good question. One of the things that I noticed my 11-year-olds is that they're fearless with technology. They'll dive right into whatever it is and figure out the ramifications of it later.
What can the potentially harmful effects of posting something inappropriate be?
We're talking about them developing their digital personality right now that will impact when they're going to jobs in the future and colleges. That's hard for an 11-year-old to grasp.
I tell my kids you can't do things or say things in certain ways because it's going to follow you.
Stacy Bartolomeo's son Anthony is in Kevin Hodgson's class. She also has a 10th grade daughter, Francesca. Both have laptops and iPads. What are your concerns about that?
I want them to go to college someday. And I want them to not have the admissions office like come and say, well, this was happening when you were in high school or when you were in 7th grade or things like that.
Of course, it wouldn't be surprising if some kids thought their parents worried too much. After all, think about all those ridiculously rich and famous people who arguably got that way thanks to many a parent's worst nightmare in the internet age. Kim Kardashian's sex tape was uploaded on the internet. Soon, she was a reality show star and the center of a multi-million-dollar empire. Paris Hilton was just a local New York socialite hoping for a reality show hit. Her sex tape on the internet helped make that happen. Winning! And Charlie Sheen's career was teetering on the brink. He began tweeting out all sorts of embarrassing messages and posting videos that in an earlier day would have finished him. As it happens, these days, you can dig yourself out of a hole by shoveling deeper.
They would rather have the fame and the celebrity than have, well, I guess I would actually call it a sense of self-respect.
Daniel Henninger of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page calls it the age of indiscretion. Do you keep that in the back of your mind? That your son may at some point, or your daughter may even do something outrageous just to get known?
I haven't thought about it with my kids. Now that you told me, though, I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, what are they going to do?
It's out there.
It's scary for me to think that way.
Bartolomeo's fear captures one of the great paradoxes of the digital age. Half a century ago, novelist George Orwell imagined a society in which our every movement is monitored by an all-seeing figure called Big Brother. Today, big data has far more ability than even Orwell imagined to see, record, analyze everything we do, to even know much of what we think. But one thing would surely surprise Orwell. Instead of our citizens demanding their privacy, they can't wait to give it away.
If the root in is behaving like a moron, I think a lot of people are willing to give up their privacy, give up their sense of shame, give up their embarrassment.
Problem is, there's just not enough fame or fortune for everyone with a digital camera and a broadband connection. But the capacity to screw up your life does seem limitless.
This is Michael's special Italian sandwich.
Domino's Pizza employees fired and criminally charged after posting a video of themselves doing gross things to food they were preparing. A high school math teacher put on leave after tweeting pictures of herself, topless and allegedly smoking pot.
Today I'm announcing my resignation from Congress.
And who can forget married New York Congressman Anthony Weiner, forced to resign in disgrace after a tweeted picture of his privates went viral.
There was a point in the past, if you were about to do something like that, there'd be a little voice in the back of your head saying, I don't think you should do this.
How many of you have an iPhone or an Android or an iPad or a Galaxy? Put up your hands. Wow. Which brings us back to that Massachusetts classroom. The question is, with all the mixed messages out there, which choices will these kids make? As a parent, what do? Do you just trust? Do you have blind faith?
Yes. Yes. I hate to admit it, but yes. And try to keep the conversation open.
2 generations ago, Gordon Moore, the founder of chipmaker Intel, predicted computers would double their capacity about every 2 years. This proved so accurate that it's become known as Moore's Law. Modern data collecting and mining has expanded with breathtaking velocity. The question is whether our social, political, and legal institutions can keep up to ensure big data doesn't turn into Big Brother. Ultimately, it's only as aware, informed citizens, in other words, by carefully watching for ourselves what's going on around us, that we'll get and keep the country we want. One that's efficient, one that's safe, but also one that doesn't always have us looking over our shoulder. That's our show. Thanks for watching.